Before we start, if you'd like to make a one-time donation to support my work, you can donate via the Super Thanks function on YouTube on any of my videos. Just click the 3 dots under this video and then click the heart that says thanks to donate the desired amount. Thank you to those who have already donated, and a huge thanks to my monthly patrons who make my work possible. Now on to the video. When you Google I Hate Jim Reddit, about 11,100,000 results come up with titles such as I fucking hate Jim, the more I watch The Office the more I hate Jim, and why do people hate Jim so much? When you Google the same phrase but change Jim's name with Pam's name, about 1,260,000 results come up with very similar titles, but more questions as to why people hate Pam rather than Rand simply talking about why they dislike her character. Lastly, when you search the same phrase but change the name to Dwight's, only around 418,000 results come up. Additionally, the top posts complaining about Dwight were written in 2019 or before, whereas with Jim and Pam the posts have been written more recently, around 2021. When you search the simple phrase Jim the Office on YouTube, videos talking about Jim's downfall come up, as well as videos talking about why people hate his wife Pam. When you search Dwight the Office on YouTube, videos about the character's genius come up. This is all to say that in any television series, characters are going to be disliked and downright hated, but that out of the main cast of characters, Jim and Pam, the audience surrogates, seem to be the most hated, especially in recent years where fans of the show are reevaluating it almost a decade after it ended in 2013. I included Dwight as a contrasting character because Dwight is another character we're supposed to like and feel sympathy towards, much like Jim and Pam, whereas with Michael he's supposed to be highly unlikable. And people seem to really like Dwight upon rewatches, and he is one of, if not the funniest characters on the show, at least in my opinion. He gets a lot of praise nowadays despite his dubious character background as a son of Nazi war criminals, as well as his history of essentially being a volunteer cop. But all of that seems to get a pass, whereas with Jim and Pam, fans tend to be a lot harsher on them, especially in recent years. One reason for this that one Redditor pointed out is because Jim, and to an extent Pam, are written to be nice people. They're who the audience is supposed to root for and identify with. They're supposed to be, if nothing else, likable in a world of unlikable people. And thus, fans tend to be more critical of their behavior when they do something that's not nice, like playing pranks on Dwight, or being hypercritical of others without reflecting on their own flaws and shortcomings. And though I do agree with that take and think that is a main reason why people tend to judge Jim more than Dwight, who pretends to call immigration on migrant workers in order not to pay them, I don't think that's the whole story when it comes to Pam. I think the main reason why people don't like Pam is because her story doesn't narratively satisfy us as viewers who are used to seeing characters achieve their dreams and have some sort of big happy ending. That's not to say that Pam's ending isn't happy, but it's not what we as an audience expect, even though the writing's on the wall. How many times is it pointed out to us that Pam doesn't really follow through on things, that she doesn't take enough chances? And though her character does achieve some growth, like telling her coworkers, mainly Jim, about how she feels about them at the fire pit, most of the choices and chances she takes are made in vain, so much so that she has to create a fake job for herself just to stay employed, and that her resume is the size of a post-it note. When I first watched the show, I was expecting that she would finally get her house with the terrace that she described in season 2, but that never happens.
I'm not gonna try to get a house like that. They don't even make houses like that in Scranton. So I'm never gonna...
Her big finale is painting the mural in the warehouse, something that's just brought up in the last season. And sure, it fits in with her art goals that were established at the beginning, but as an audience, we expected her to do more because that's what's supposed to happen, right? Why didn't she turn her love for art into a lucrative career? Monetize your passion, Pam. That doesn't mean that Pam's character is bad, as the point of her character is to be more realistic and have an open-ended ending. But that does make a lot of people dislike her, including me, if I'm being honest. I've watched The Office at least 4 times since 2020, and I don't like Jim and Pam, and I find Dwight and Michael's relationship a lot more compelling upon rewatches. So now that we've dissected why people are more harsh on Jim and Pam, it's time to ask the question, is the hate deserved? Well, that depends on what specifically you're talking about when it comes to Jim and Pam's characters. So let's dive into the main gripes with everyone's favorite couple, PB and J. So let's start with Jim. And note that I won't be talking about all of the gripes people have with these characters, just the main ones I've seen come up time and time again. Also, these are just my opinions. If you happen to disagree, feel free to let me know down below, and let's get started. The first reason why people tend not to like Jim is because they see him as a bully and a coward. Jim puts Dwight's things in Jell-O, goes out of his way to dress up as him, and even goes as far as to climb a telephone pole to just see Dwight squirm. Bullying Dwight is entertainment to him, and he does this because he's bored at his job. He finds his work meaningless, and the only enjoyment he gets out of his day is pushing Dwight's buttons and hanging out at reception. Sometimes the bullying is warranted, like when he calls Jim's daughter Pee-Pee when he knows her name is Cece, and for shredding paper when he's on an important sales call, actually trying to do his job. But most of the time, Jim bullies Dwight simply because he can. And Jim doesn't bully Dwight for things that are actually awful. For example, his uncle is alluded to be a former Nazi who's still puttering down in Argentina. When Dwight tried to visit him, it was protested by the Shoah Foundation. Instead, Jim pulls pranks on Dwight because he finds Dwight annoying. The point to all of this is to show that Jim is an underachiever, and thus his character arc can only be completed once he starts doing something he's passionate about, which he does. Does that justify what Jim does to Dwight? Honestly, I don't know, but I do find Jim's pranks to be funny at times, but other times they tend to take you out of the moment because you're just like, really, Jim? You climbed a telephone pole just to see Dwight climb a telephone pole? In the end, Dwight's evil deeds are also mitigated by his gullible demeanor and childlike qualities that balance out his more dubious character traits, whereas Jim pranks are just taken at point blank because he's a nice guy, so why isn't he being nice? But is Jim too nice? This leads us to the second biggest gripe people have with Jim, and that is his love for Pam manifests in creepy ways. And this I do agree with. For example, the freaking teapot gets me every time. He literally admits he held onto a hot sauce packet Pam thought was ketchup for like 2 years. And at this point, I don't even know if the writers intended that to come off as really weird or as romantic. He also is a doer of big romantic gestures. For example, he buys his parents' home for Pam without telling her, and she just has to be okay with it. He also invests $10,000 into his startup company Athlete and decides to move the family to Philly without telling her. And to be fair, she never complained about his big romantic gestures before and also invested in Woof, but that was more of a joke than a big life decision. But she probably never complained about the gestures because what's she going to do? Tell Jim to resell the house after he already took out a mortgage on it? Big romantic gestures, either in public or private, tend to put people on the spot and make it hard to decline what's being offered because you don't want to embarrass the other person. So I do think that Pam's anger was warranted later on when Jim kept going behind her back, and I think that's the overall consensus today. But I think at the time, a lot of people found Pam to be ungrateful, and that was definitely fueled by early 2010 sexism towards the character. The last point about Jim's character that people don't like, or at least that I really don't like, is how he treated Karen. Pam gets a lot of shit for leading Roy on, which we'll talk about soon, but Jim leads Karen on for almost an entire season, when it's clear that he doesn't really like her and that they don't have things in common. It's even alluded to that Karen is Jim's rebound from Pam, but he fails to realize that. Which of course is realistic, but Karen deserved so much better. The way Jim treats her annoys me so much when he's supposed to, again, be a nice guy, but in the end he's anything but. Like the section with Jim, I won't be detailing all the reasons why people dislike this character. I'll just be talking about a few, and if you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments below. I think the main reason why people get annoyed with Pam is because she doesn't accomplish anything art or career-wise. Michael even points out she doesn't follow through on things, and in the end, she really doesn't follow through on anything when it comes to her job. But when it comes to her personal life, she does accomplish what she wants to do, which is to be with Jim, her best friend, and to stand up for herself more. She also does art in her free time as a hobby. For example, she made an entire comic book for Jim. In the end, Pam doesn't have a dream job and just wants to make enough money to have a comfortable life with her loved ones, and I think that's realistic and also speaks to a lot of people. But it's hard to admit that you don't have career ambitions because then people see you as a loser, much like how people see Pam. She doesn't graduate art school, she doesn't make it as a salesperson, and seems to get so many chances to do something with her life, but doesn't take them, and that's frustrating to watch, but again, realistic. And in the end, she does decide to take the plunge and get out of her comfort zone to be with Jim and to stay together as a family, and sells the house as her big romantic gesture for Jim. The last point I want to touch on when it comes to Pam is that people tend to be really angry with how she flirts with Jim when she's with Roy and how she leads Jim on. I do agree that Pam flirts with Jim and does lead him on into thinking that she might leave Roy when she's clearly not ready to. And again, that's my interpretation of the events in the series. Feel free to disagree with me. She does admit to Jim that him misinterpreting things was her fault, and then he snaps back with, "I'm sorry I misinterpreted our friendship," which is a really snarky thing to say. I do think that Pam comes out looking worse because we're seeing most of this from Jim's perspective, and Jim is clearly just waiting for Pam to finally be done with Roy, which puts unfair expectations on her. But clearly, Pam isn't ready to leave Roy just because she also has feelings for Jim, and that's okay. I think she's seen by a lot of fans as being quote-unquote stupid for not realizing Roy is a bad guy and not dumping him once she meets Jim. But I think she does realize the position she's in. She's just afraid to take the risk because part of her character in the beginning is that she's afraid to make her own choices and take chances. As Jim says to her, you gotta take a chance on something sometime. And in the end, she does and gets her happy ending. Even if it's not what we expect, it's what fits her character, and that's okay. In the end, the two main reasons why people tend to dislike this couple the most is because, one, they're supposed to be nice, and when they're not nice, we judge them for it more than the other characters who are supposed to be mean and unlikable in the show, and two, because Pam specifically doesn't fulfill the usual satisfying character arc. And honestly, Jim and Pam are far from my favorite characters in the series. I find them really annoying on rewatches, especially Pam, sorry not sorry, but I also see the merit of her character and storyline. I think what grates on me even more than Pam is Jim's treatment of Karen and how he only uses her as a tool to try to get over Pam. So that's it for this one. Let me know what you thought down below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.